knowledge managers want to become. And she was the former academic director of the Information and Knowledge Strategy program at Columbia. She's on the faculty of that program. And I wanted to go to that program, didn't work out. But so she doesn't just do wonderful knowledge management, she actually spreads it and encourages it and feeds it. So I think we're all very grateful that Kate is here to talk to us about knowledge management, the future of KM. And we're very excited to be learning. Thank you, Kate. Appreciate your time. And everybody, thank you so much for coming. And here, over to Kate and her program. Thank you.
Fantastic. I am really, really grateful to be here, you guys. I think we're going to be together for a little bit less than an hour. I'm going to share my screen, but even though I'm sharing my screen and my tongue is flapping, I really want you guys to interject. This story is about you. The story is in no way complete. We're still telling this story. And I'm really interested in your views, and I'm going to even prod you. So get ready to come on camera and take off your mute. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let me know if you can see it. Let's see. Here it goes. Should be sharing the whole thing. How does that look? Is that working? Okay, good. All right, so as Tara said, I'm at Columbia University, and I'm also the president of Align Consulting, which does a lot of stuff in the knowledge space and a lot of stuff in the collaboration space. Jamie's joining me. Jamie and I met about 5 years ago, before Jamie came and joined the Information and Knowledge Strategy program at Columbia. And I think the two of us are going to have a lot to share with you. Again, as I said, I would really welcome your comments. Here's what our journey is going to be today. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the kind of context in which I will call it the younger generation, or the digital natives, enter into the world. What are some of the experiences that they have? Then we're going to talk a little bit about some of the values that they have offered to us as knowledge practitioners who've been around for a while. I am very, very excited about their perspectives, their courage. They're willing to kind of break with some of the boundaries that we perhaps established in the baby boomers and the Generation X's. I'm going to go through a lot of these, and my angle is going to be, what does this mean for all of us? Occasionally, I'll be just speaking for us as knowledge practitioners who have been around for a while, because these kind of different lenses that the digital natives bring sort of poke and prod us. But also, I would say that it's important for us as people who've been around to sort of poke and prod, if you will, some of the digital natives, because I think there are some things that perhaps maybe haven't been part of their experiences, and which do kind of create more lasting KM experiences. So as I said, we're going to talk a little bit about things like consumerism and sort of how that drives the digital experience. The whole idea that metrics really matter, data matter, metrics matter, living out loud, working out loud matters. There's an opportunity for knowledge to be really, really clean and credible. And there's also some exploitation of some of our public channels. And there's a need that many of our digital natives have expressed, which is, you know, I would like to be respected for what I can create. Also, there's a statement that I've heard from a number of my chief knowledge officer colleagues that often in the environment where they operate, people show up and they say, look, I've got a new application. Let's be a KM expert. And that does produce some challenges for those of us who are trying to knit things together and tell a single story and create a magical search experience. I think also we've got this really exciting and really challenging time that we're living in right now. And at the same time, we're learning from the digital natives. Let's go and prod where we are coming from. Let's change the way we think about our virtual work. And here's this opportunity. This moment is an immense opportunity. And at the same time, there are some risks. And then we'll talk about some conclusions and directions. By the way, what I'm referring to when I go through all these crazy little headings is an article that I recently published on the Henley Forum. And just this week, the Columbia University School of Professional Studies republished the article. So if you guys simply search for Ask a Digital Native, you probably will find this on the Columbia University website. So Jamie, if you're potentially on a browser, you can just poke it up there. The Henley version, I should have, this is the Henley version. It has, you know, lovely iconography and stuff like that, but the version that is available to you for free and easy to get to is on the Columbia website. I don't know why they reposted it, but that's okay. So let's go back to my slides. So let's get going. So when I talk about a digital native, basically what I'm doing is I'm talking about the millennials and the Generation X people. So really I'm talking about anybody from the age of 40 down to the age of 18. So that's a pretty broad group. What makes them exciting for me is that they didn't have to live with fax machines, typewriters, paper environments. Many of them have never taken a note on a piece of paper in their lives. And many of them really aren't bounded by some of the things that we were bounded with. So I'm a Gen X'er, but I find myself very, very high affinity to this digital native crowd. And I've called the group the BBGX just to describe Baby Boomers and Generation X's together. So I'd like to start, just everybody come off mute. For those of us who are Baby Boomers or Generation X'ers, what do you love about your digital native friends? You can say whatever you want. You can say an adjective, you can say a noun, you can say a sentence. What do you love about your digital native friends?
They're technology savvy.
Yes. Denise, that's fabulous. Anybody else? Something that you say you love about your digital native colleagues.
I think part of it is I like the fact that their conversation does not have to be mandated. It's something they're used to on the internet or in other forums. I like that things like diversity and inclusion are also not mandated, but normal expectations. And I'm sorry, I have a small child at the front door. I'll go let him in a second.
Cool. And they're comfortable, or they're embracing diversity and inclusion and conversation. That's great. Anything else? What do you guys love about your digital natives friends? And if you're a digital native, what do you love about your friends that you think is just neat as a KM practitioner? Well, I'm going to tell you about a number of things that I'm very fond of when we start sort of flowing through these things. And I'm really expecting that a number of you are going to start saying, oh yeah, me too. So now for you guys who are digital natives, what are some of the things that you love about your Baby Boomer and Generation X friends?
Tough questions.
So if you're on mute, come off of mute, feel free to just say, what are some of the things that you love about your Baby Boomer Generation X friends? Christopher, I think you're probably a digital native. No?
I am. I'm right on the cusp, and So when you talk about typewriters, I'm an old enough millennial to have used a typewriter. And I always say, I remember when we got the internet at my house. So I'm not quite a digital native. And so that's why I'm struggling with this, because I think I sit in many ways in both of these
Right in the
camps.
middle.
I'm a millennial, but I think I affiliate with Gen X'ers more than a lot of millennials. So
Cool.
and that's why it's also hard for me, because then I get torn between this divide.
Or maybe another way of reframing that is that you get to straddle. So
Yeah.
your empathies are in both directions, and possibly your sympathies are in both directions. All right, well, good. One of the things that I talk about frequently when I'm talking about knowledge practice is I say it's information management and collaboration. It's the what and the we. And that those of us who kind of grew up in information management think in columns and rows. And those of us who grew up possibly in the later moments think more about circles. And we're possibly more interested in things that aren't necessarily sitting in columns and rows. And what is really exciting is for you to be able to have columns and rows and circles. And if you look at some of the technologies that are coming at us today, they actually are in both spaces. So they might be using things like the graph to go and see interrelationships among people, but they also have the ability to intuit metadata. Metadata is a nickname for columns and rows, right? Metadata is a value you've got in a column where you've got a facet for tagging an item. Really, really interesting. So it's just kind of really profound that the kinds of technologies that are out there today, intentionally or not, are starting to address this dichotomy that KM presents us. It's the what and the we. And I just find that to be very exciting. And those of us who've been waiting for a while are kind of feeling like it's about time. So let's talk a little bit about the experience of digital natives. Many of the digital natives came of age just smack in the middle of the 2008 recession. And they also have kind of, shall I say, swum in the world of social media, which presents intense polarization. Some of that has been amplified by some of the algorithms that sit in those tools that we love so much. So those tools like Facebook and Google go and create the edgier experiences that are ripples outside of what you might be searching or experiencing. And that naturally creates polarization. By design, it serves us the salt, the sugar, and the fat that seem to be appealing, but really aren't necessarily healthy. And so polarization has been our experience digitally, and it's also been our experience nationally. Climate change. Many of the digital natives are going to learn a little bit about what they think are radically concerned about climate change. It's been hugely important for their lives, and many of them have actually suffered, particularly in other countries, particularly the kids who are living in island nations or living in countries that are seeing extreme weather conditions. They're seeing it upfront and personal. I wrote cyber insecurity instead of cyber security. People who have to second guess that the letter that they're getting, the email that they're getting, the site that they're going to could be mistrusted, are living in a world that is so different from when we first came out into the Wild West, but the wild opportunities that the internet presented. It never would have occurred to us that we had to sign in to some of the things that we sign in today, because privacy was taken as a given. Another thing is a big deal for people who have come of age in, the last 40 years, last 20 years, if you will, is the wealth gap. That there is a widening gap between the few who have most of the wealth of the country or the world and the few that don't, or shall I say, the many that don't. And if you look over here on the right, this study, I wonder if I've got a link to the study. It should be here. It's in my article, and I guess there's the link to it, but it's the same link for both of these two slides. There's a Deloitte study on the digital natives that was published in 2019. Some of the conclusions are remarkably prescient towards the time that we're in. I take from that, one, it was prescient, but two, a lot of the stress that everyone is feeling right now, the digital natives have been feeling for quite some time. So what was interesting is when the digital natives surveyed by the Deloitte team were asked about what they prioritized as their goals, travel, one of the things they want to do is see the world. Tragically, they're not able to see the world right now with COVID. The second one was they wanted to be wealthy. They wanted to be able to know that they're going to be kind of comfortable in their age, not just their old age. They also want to be able to have a home, help society, have children. Interestingly enough, having children was far lower in the list than their predecessors who were responding to similar surveys in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And part of that is that economic security has been far lower for this population than for any of the preceding generations. One of the stats that I found was that from a Newsweek article, the kind of group of people that we call the millennials, which we saw on that previous slide, now have about 4% of the wealth of the world. In the 1970s, that percentage in real terms owned 20% of the wealth of the world. So they are only 1/5 as affluent in terms of wealth, which means physical and cash assets, 1/5 as affluent as their forebears. And this is in part due to the fact that we've got hugely skewed wealth disparities, but it's also because of the disadvantaged state they experienced by arriving into their working years in the middle of a recession. And you've probably heard that having come into their working years in the middle of the recession has disadvantaged them permanently. During their lifetimes, they will be acquiring wealth at considerably lower rates than people who came before them. So it's a big deal, and it's interesting how they've got a sort of, the world's my oyster kind of attitude. I'm not necessarily going to be wealthy enough, so I'm going to put off having children. And many of them also have put off having homes. I don't know what was in the rest of this list, but you did not see having property high on the list. Another thing that I like to say about the digital natives is that they have kind of other major kind of concerns about their orbit. One is that all institutions are suspect. You've heard probably stories about how the digital natives are really uncomfortable with the way the government has been using the world's assets, both their natural resources and their financial resources. And I would say probably their human resources as well. They do have suspicion about institutions writ large, and those don't need to only be governments or educational institutions. They also are suspect of companies. They're also suspect of NGOs. They're suspect of policymakers. They feel like they've been betrayed. I mentioned before cyber insecurity. They are generally concerned about data privacy, and they're less likely to interact with a company to the extent that company hasn't proven to them that they're going to keep their data private. And of course, a major concern of theirs is diversity. And you raised that earlier, Jamie, that they want to make sure that anywhere they operate, there is a sense of justice. I thought this thing on the right was kind of interesting, and it shows the sort of hardening of the digital natives against social media. I thought it was quite interesting that almost 50% had said they'd kind of like to go cold turkey. gee, what will that mean? And I put a little note down there. Okay, so we don't know how social media has been defined, but it'd be very interesting if they did say they would be happier to go without, or they wanted to go cold turkey. What do they plan to do? Digital's not gone away. Social media may not be in their orbit, but what do they plan to do? Jamie, you mentioned some of the things that your Gen Zs are using.
Sure. Yeah. My son was actually born in 2002, so he's on the cusp of Gen Y and Gen Z. But I would say, that generation, it was funny when he was a teenager, when he became a teenager, a lot of people were still talking about how you need to make sure you watch what your kids are doing on the internet, make sure that you watch what they're doing on social media. But he had no social media accounts, nothing that we would consider social media, like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter. Those were not his spaces. So I didn't really have to worry about that. What I did have to worry about, though, were platforms like TikTok and Discord and Twitch and, these gamer places that are primarily for conversation. And obviously then, semi-public and then he was able to share private information about himself. So we did have to have conversations about that, but ultimately it was, it's a little bit different for their generation, and the freedom at which they seem to like to have conversations in those spaces is really interesting as well. I mean, when I was, just out of college, I think the AOL chat room was the thing, and it was scary. And I remember my heart beating really fast the first time I went into an AOL chat room. But now it's like my son is almost, when he was not in school, now, like he is now, but when he would be almost 24/7 plugged into a group discussion, a group chat of some sort, and people just popping in and out of conversation. I think that's interesting, especially juxtaposed against this idea that they, on the one hand, they are very concerned about privacy and who is accessing their data, and obviously platforms like Discord and TikTok are, especially TikTok now, we know are owned by interesting characters and players in the space. But I think it's funny that on the one hand they are caring about their privacy, but on the other hand don't seem to think beyond, they seem to think their spaces that they are used to communicating in are safe and private and kind of their own. So many interesting juxtapositions here.
Yeah. That's great that you mentioned that. That's actually going to be a good lead in to a couple of ideas about what we can, kind of follow up with here. So I'm going to give you 5 different attributes of the digital natives that I find completely inspiring. And also ones that I think will cause us to have to do some changes to our knowledge management approaches. And I know there's some more people who have recently entered, by the way, and please jump in. Please feel to make comments and add your own opinions and even refute mine. So I was reading an article in, what was this, like the Lincoln Journal or something, and I was delighted to see that there were a bunch of teams who said, I don't really like what I'm getting from traditional media. And it's not because I think traditional media is not giving me enough information, but I really don't trust the institutions that are the traditional media. So they summoned their own energy and a little bit of their spare time that happened to emerge because of COVID. And they created this thing called impact change. Now, I don't know why there's no E on there. When I refreshed it, the E showed up, but somehow I managed to do a screenshot when it wasn't working. But what this particular application does is provide you the policies in a neutral way for all of the political candidates. So earlier in the site, you can actually find the candidates for every single state in the union. And they're just starting and they don't have quite as much detail as you'd be expecting. However, they set this up as a crowdsourced experience. So you can come in and you can say, look, I want to become a member of this and I will fill in my state and I will sign a covenant that I will not be biased. And they have a leaderboard, which you would expect. Everybody likes those. Gamification is hip for this crowd. And what's remarkable about this is that it feels like Apple. It's data, but it feels like a comfortable consumer application. And I encourage you guys to go out there. It is, I think it's called impactchangeusa.com. So if you guys feel like fiddling around with it, you can see it's just beautifully designed. When these kids started it, I don't think they knew anything about building sites, and they certainly didn't know anything about knowledge. And they've done a pretty remarkable job. I think they're all in their early teens. So in fact, you may even say that these guys are Gen Zs, but the point is here that they've said, I want to be able to act like a consumer, not just simply a researcher, to better understand what's really going on. I need to get neutral data. Now, what this means for a knowledge practitioner is that if you stand up your beautiful SharePoint site with your lovely columns and rows, they're going to be looking at it saying, why don't you have a picture of George Washington on it? They're going to be looking at it and saying, why can't I just so quickly search for, the KM community of DC? And their expectations are usually different from what applications we usually are constrained to use to deliver knowledge services inside our organizations. So we should start thinking of ourselves as digital producers. What that means is legitimately spend the money to create a vital digital experience for your knowledge programs. And that might mean spending on some things you didn't think you had to spend on. You thought, I need to spend 70% of my budget on cleaning up content. You may need to flip it. You may need to spend 70% of your budget on creating an experience that's intuitive and integrated, and only 30% on content. I would have considered that heresy when I first started knowledge practice. It's like, who cares what it looks like? It's meaningful. And then others would tell me they don't want to be there. So make it inviting. The second point I'd like to make is that counting is sport, really no matter who you're counting or who is counting. And I just simply gave you a screenshot of my counting. This is what I did on my iPad, and it looks like whatever day this was, Wednesday, I must have been using another device. And, I kind of like knowing what I've been doing, but God, would I not want to have that be, the fare of my management. I wouldn't want my management to know that I had been in and out of devices, not because I really care they've been out of devices, but I would hate for the conclusions they might draw. Whereas a lot of the digital natives think counting is actually a pretty damn good thing. They like seeing their own performance. This is a quote from my nephew who just graduated from college, and he said, I want to give Garmin my heart rate, and I don't mind them having my workouts. Maybe they will make a better algorithm. You guys know what Garmin is. Garmin is, there's a Garmin. Jamie's showing us that she's got a Garmin watch, which will tell her her altitude and her geography, and it'll tell her pulse, and it'll tell the speed. His attitude was basically, I think that, being able to count me, count my system is immensely valuable. And ultimately, I think he sees that there's a ulterior motive to this, which is better products, better services, better performance. So just to echo what Jamie said, which is, this is the group that fears cyber security issues. They fear the loss of data. But meanwhile, they actually like the idea that data serves us well. The quantity of data, the kind of sleuthing of data is going to be able to improve our products and services. So it is, again, that tension between, knowing that one is exposed, but also knowing that data and big data can make this world a better place. So what does this mean for us with knowledge practice? we have to all get familiar with things like gamification. We all need to get familiar with things like dashboards. And it could be as simple as the dashboard representing the consumption of your content on your website, right? You know, if you're a knowledge practitioner, you know you've got a pile of data that's sitting right underneath the surface. But it also could be not that difficult for you to do something like, oh, look at the number of the people in the 4 different divisions in our organization. Or look at the number of countries we're touching. Or look at the number of clients that we interface with on a regular basis. This is spectacular. Think about all these people. Each time we interact with them, they could be an advocate for us because we care about them and they trust us. Who knew that there were 1,000 advocates that are at our fingertips right now? Like, who knows what needs to be counted? But this generation thinks counting is an art form. And please feel free if you want to add something. Denise, did you want to add something? I saw you raise your hand.
No, I was just smiling at the counting.
Good, good. I don't have the ability to see all the faces. Like the way this is set up, I can only see some of the faces. And I also can't see the chat. So if you guys have like things you want to say or raise your hands, please jump right in. Another thing that I thought was kind of interesting as I was sort of putting together these slides was that, you know, there's plenty of knowledge out there that is suspect. And many times you're going to hear from a digital native, just like the guys that created that changeusa.com, that they, impactchangeusa.com, that they had some reservations about trusting traditional media or trusting some of the things the institutions were telling them. But what's really interesting is this is the group that also wants to get a lot of knowledge for free. So it's the suspect, but they like to get it for free. What I've given you here is a screenshot of Stack Overflow, which is an open source application where people, it's a little like GitHub, people go and post questions, most of them very technical, and then they freely give them to each other. But you'll notice that I ended this thing with respect is coveted. These guys want to be known. If they answer a lot of questions, they want a badge. They want to be recognized. If you can see here in this thing in the middle, these are, quote, bountied questions. So I would suspect what that means, I haven't spent a lot of research time on this, is that these are organizations or these are individuals who have said to Stack Overflow, look, I will help feed a pool of money, or I will help feed a scholarship or something behind the scenes. And so people who answer this are going to get some number of points. And there's some kind of point collection at the end. I don't know if somebody is a member of Stack Overflow that can tell me about the bounty. Anybody know anything about the bounty process? No, I wish I knew more about it, but obviously respect is coveted. They want to make sure that they got recognized for their contributions. And there are many open source platforms out there. And we too, in our knowledge programs, need to be able to figure out how to, you know, give respect when these things are done. And one thing I would also add to this is that when people see that their promotion path inside the organization is, you know, very long and slow, what they tend to do is to look outside for that respect. So I might be sitting in a division, but I consider myself a knowledge practitioner. So I'm going to go to the KM community of DC and I'm going to get this friendship. I'm going to get this group where I can speak. The discipline to which I affiliate really trumps the specific company or trumps the specific division. And you're more likely to see among this younger generation an affinity with a discipline, which could be outside the organization, than affinity with a corporation. So, Jamie, did you want to add anything to this one?
No, I think I do think that it's interesting. I mean, Reddit is another community I would say that it is interesting to comment on because, you know, we do have, I don't know, I think when the internet, I guess it's important to mention that when I graduated from college, it was 1997. So, you know, Amazon was the one-page website. And, but, you know, so technically I'm a Gen X'er, but I immediately kind of, unbeknownst to me at the time, I got into the tech field and I became a web developer and I became a web designer. So I'm not a digital native, but I am a digital, I'm like a content creator native. So that kind of makes my view of it interesting, right? Because all digital natives are now using things that, you know, before we had all these cool tools, I was building the tool. So, you know, instead of using a content management system, I was building a content management system back then. So back then when you had forums like this, they were forums and people contributed their, you know, question, answers, and pretty standard and typical. But those have become increasingly more complex and definitely more niched and focused, not just on tech. I think a lot of those forums were technical, but now you've got, you know, other kinds of forums where people are talking about much different ranges of information, and there's a much more democratic process, I think, of sharing information everywhere and building credibility for yourself. I think another thing I think of is Medium, the platform Medium, and how you can self-publish your work there. No one's really, you know, there isn't a god of the medium that's looking over your shoulder, but the community is looking at your work and the community is rating it and commenting on it. And that's how you're getting credibility inside Medium, for example. So I think all those things are really interesting because it does definitely illustrate that shift now. And, you know, hate to talk about how the, you know, the shift is moving away from institutionalized education, right? Traditional academia into this space now of, you know, we don't necessarily have to rely on, you know, the Ivy League experts to tell us what's right. And you know, we're now relying upon the community and each other. And we are trusting the community of experts that are outside of that community and in the larger world. That is a really interesting shift, I think. And that's, especially now, I think that's continuing to grow. And that's why we're seeing programs that aren't necessarily degree earning programs. There's certifications, there are other ways that you can learn and become proficient at specific skills that don't require you to have a 4-year degree or a graduate degree. All that is, to me, indication of how our knowledge, where we're getting our knowledge is changing, how we're attributing trust to sources of knowledge is changing. And it'll be interesting to watch that with this generation going forward.
Yeah, I think it's super exciting stuff. Just on a side, one of the things I teach is a course on, open source, open innovation, and open data. So basically it's called networked work. And I underscore kind of this vibrant and vital role that networks are playing, communities not unlike this one here. But what some of the researchers are showing is that increasingly, the longer these open platforms or these open experiences or the open software enterprises, I wouldn't call them enterprises, but communities exist, the more the managers, also in air quotes, the managers of these communities need to be attending to some of the kind of traditional facilitation and project management types of roles. Back in the day, if you were like a member, there's this one article that I have my students read, if you're a member of the Debian community and you got really good at publishing your content and you know, a lot of the code was committed that you authored, then you would be the first in line to be heading up the Debian community. As time went on, increasingly, the platforms of the people who were pitching themselves to be head of the Debian community had things like, I manage, people like me, I have good social capital. I know how to get things done. Very, very interesting that some of these communities are now starting to embrace some of the things that we've been trying to teach our organizations to do. So there's a lot more to be said about that, but I just thought that was just exciting to see how that trend has sort of happened. So let's keep going and let's get on to the next one here. So the next observation that a number of my knowledge officer friends have raised with me is this idea that because the digital natives have been outside and they've seen a lot of consumer-like interfaces and they've seen a lot of data thrown at them, they're like, you know, they're lovers of Yelp. They're not going to go to that restaurant or this restaurant until they actually see the Yelp reviews, even as those are suspect, right, sometimes. But they're pretty damn convinced that KM is simple. If I can just go and, you know, grab Bonfire over here and grab Slack over there, and I can get a free blue jeans over there. I can just cobble together my own KM experience. Why do I need you? And this is a fabulous opportunity for us to stand back and have a dialogue around citizenship, around interoperability, around trust, around shared metadata, around how do assumptions in different places get talked about. And so when you've got data over in these different places, and the, you know, when we were in this database and we said that was called a customer, we may have had different assumptions than in this database where we called it a customer. And if we try to mash these up, we've got to have a conversation about whether we're going to normalize one of those columns. How are we going to be able to make something meaningful? Because we really do want to tell this bigger story about a customer. And we who have been doing KM for a long time have a very sober perspective on how hard that is. Whereas a lot of people who come from sort of the consumer data's everywhere, let's just normalize it experience, say, well, you know, can't we just get one of these little tools, these little ETL tools, and won't that just do it for us? It might help us by giving us an interface, but we've still got to have the patient work. Tara, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I think I'm finding this with my kids. I have a 17-year-old and 13-year-old, and there's not a whole lot of patience with the minutia of learning because they can find out what they need to know by Googling it. And they don't have to basically put a lot of time into it. And they, oh God, they don't take notes. Perish the thought to write something down. And this is so completely different from when I grew up, because it was all about notes. It was all about what you wrote down, and there was no way to Google it. The Google was called library. And, and so the fact that I had to walk someplace to find the information, it's so foreign to my kids now, and thinking that they definitely have a different attitude toward knowledge because they're used to finding it really fast, and so you have that point where I'll say, well, what social media are you using? You know, because I always worry about, you know, posting anything personal. We all talk about that. Don't post anything personal. Don't tell them your name, address. Don't talk about that stuff, you know. And of course, Snapchat videos. That's the cool one now, TikTok. But Facebook and Twitter are for the old people. Oh, you know, they're all the old social media. So we're totally not cool anymore, even though social media is so different and revolutionary for us. And I think the term, Jamie, is digital immigrant, because I was telling Kate, I actually, the the book Digital Natives, when that term was coined, that was the first book I ever purchased without leaving my dinner table. I basically had my Kindle and I purchased it and I was reading it in less than 30 seconds, which is amazing. And so that I was so proud of myself. I felt like a native, but I know I'm not. I'm an immigrant. So I try and learn from my kids, but I also want to be careful and try and teach them about some of the things I've learned. But you know, I get I don't want knowledge now, Mom. Please don't give me knowledge. And I'm like, how could you not want knowledge? But it is that new normal, that new way of looking at learning is completely upended. It's interesting to see what's going to happen as we go forward here.
So interesting. Well, in this particular example, a number of my KM friends in the Boston KM group have said, well, I'll be toiling away trying to stand up, Teams and a SharePoint site and the migration process of brilliance from Teams into the SharePoint site. And, and I'm being a good soldier and I'm making sure that I'm using archives and security parameters and protocols. And then somebody shows up and says, oh, I got blue jeans, oh, I've got, Interact. I like that. LifeRide's not so bad. And so the challenge is for us to harness the goodness in all that. So if you think of just in the most simple terms, information management is, I'll do this so it's your left to right. It's, supply, a miracle occurs, which is like us, configuring and going and curating and placing and pushing and notifying all that. And there's demand. And I would submit to you that they actually are pretty good at the supply and the demand. Contrary to many of the BBGXs may have hoarded their knowledge. So the supply was often constrained and they didn't give us stuff until way late. And then on the demand side, many times they would say, not invented here, I'm not going to take that. Whereas I would submit to you that the digital natives are like, I've got to share it because people are going to give me recognition if I share it, right? So I'm going to get, recognition that I am, part of this tribe. And also, as long as it's easy for me to share, I want somebody to look at it and kind of poke at it because maybe I'll get it better. And then on a demand side, they definitely want to reuse stuff first. In rare cases, they'll just be like, no one's ever done this before. But a lot of the time they're like, all right, I'm in my 20s, I'm in my 30s, I'm in big corporation USA or a big government USA. Someone's got to have done this before. And that's really exciting, but we have to work on the inside and get them to work with us to understand some of these complexities. And I know people are putting stuff into the chat. So since I'm not reading the chat, let me know if there's somebody who's got something to add. And by the way, what you're looking at here is actually an open source site. So Microsoft has this thing called the tech community, and people go out there and share brilliance. And this is a good example. Everybody knows that we need something called a what to use when. And so Marielle shared this thing that says, well, I know it's so complicated. You got all these tools in the Microsoft suite and they all feel like they're doing exactly the same thing. I submit to you that they're different and look at, we can do this and you can teach your organization to do this too. So moving right along. So I love this picture and I think you should actually read this little article too, because it'll make you laugh. But it seems like our virtual work, our community, and our serendipity really do need a reset. One of the things that I've learned a lot and I've observed working with the 20-somethings all around me, all my nieces and nephews and all their friends were all around me all summer because many of them either were now out of work suddenly or they were working virtually, which meant that, on the dock by the water, somehow in the middle of the day, they're miraculously not in a meeting. And one of the things that they were, kind of telling me a little bit about is that as they are sort of part of these various different communities and things, or just simply when they're in their universities, they don't just show up at the cafeteria and just see who plunks down next to them. They will schedule their little time at the cafeteria with somebody that they know. And if they haven't done that, they will put their heads down and they will be working on their machines while they're in the cafeteria, oftentimes not interacting with somebody who is a stranger, which I think is really interesting and possibly sad. But I may be missing something because their time use may be more effective. But another piece of it too is that they feel like they're curating their lives, and sometimes it feels like their lives are curating them. And this is an example where this guy goes, just one moment while I check this. So his social media or something is curating him. And so he may have been very intentional about sitting down with this woman, who knows, but you'll notice that she's bored. Now, she's probably super bored because of his distraction, but she may be bored because there's no agenda. And one of the things this is teaching us is, for those of us who have been facilitating communities of practice, and this is one, more often than not, our digital natives really do want structure. They want to know that the minutes are programmed. They want to know that there's going to be a speaker who's going to speak to them. They want to know that if they are going to contribute, they're going to be on the leaderboard, or they're going to get some kind of, points or whatever kind of metrics for being part of it. And it could be that emanates from really just having so much uncertainty in their lives, as we talked about at the very, very beginning. It could emanate from the fact that these folks love the count. They love the count. They love the idea of being counted. But it also could emanate from heritage. I was sharing earlier with Jamie and with Tara that when I was growing up, I was very programmed. I knew what I was going to do every single day of the week. But I would submit to you that many of these digital natives have been equally programmed, if not more so, by their families, by their friends, by their own peer pressure. And so their expectation is that they're optimizing their use of time. And so we do have work to do, because I think there is a passion for a community. And that's where I'm going to sort of end up with this thing. This was the Gallop poll that was actually done, I think, in 2013. But I believe that we haven't seen much of a change. The Gallop poll was run across the country, asking employees, what are the things that make you want to come to work? And interestingly enough, they talked about fairness, they talked about participation, they talked about reciprocity, and ultimately they said a palpable sense of community. So while there maybe are different ways that people want to experience KM and experience community, I think this we can agree on, that we want to be part of community. We may need different ways to kind of angle ourselves into it, but we do live happier lives when we're not alone. And there's even some evidence that we live longer lives when we're not alone. So here's just simple conclusions and directions. What everybody needs to do, no matter where you are in any age group or any kind of era, whether you're an immigrant or you're a native or you're an adopted or adopter, cross the status lines and empathize. When I say the status lines could be hierarchy, but they could also be division. It also could be background. It could be anything. If you have an inkling of a perception of a status difference, cross it. That's your duty. Engage, but structure and measure. So engage, we still need to kind of embrace community, but we do have to recognize that we need to add some of these elements which really animate the digital natives. Also, I had mentioned before, think both columns and rows and circles. Think both about the what and the we, information and collaboration. So capitalize on the intuition that the digital natives have. They've been in columns and rows. The good news is they can think about metadata, but you must sort of nudge and applaud their collaboration and nudge and applaud their appreciation as it comes for the complexities that live under the hood. I wrote here, stand out of the way and let the innovation flow. The truth is, since we're all here on this call, we're all innovators. So jump right in. But probably what's going to happen is that you as a manager are going to have many things on your plate. Find all of the ways you can move the pebbles out of the path of the innovation. So spend the time on the digital experience. Don't have them tripped up on interfaces that feel different from what they experience outside the company or the organization. Make sure your digital products have ways to count. Know that open source, open data, open innovation are here to stay. Learn about them. Learn everything you can about them. Learn about what's happening on Reddit. Learn about what's happening on Medium. Learn about what kinds of things these people are consuming. See if there are ways that you can bring the open source way inside your corporation. And then also focus on social impact, because that's what people care about. It's one of the most important pieces of the experience inside the organization. People will be drawn to an organization in their job search process. That's what the research tells us. The reason why I'm showing you this picture as sort of a nice ending one, this is an example of what digital natives can do. This woman, Cassandra Rose, is the head of Maine's Climate Council. And she recently gave a presentation which was stunning because of what she's been able to accomplish. Sorry, there's not very good this is me screenshotting her, so I'm screenshotting screenshots. I can imagine it's not very clear. But it was stunning in terms of what she's been able to accomplish. But what's even more stunning is she had 230 constituents that she was wrangling in order to develop this climate plan. And it was really great how she used information the way any good knowledge practitioner would, but it's also really great that she was harnessing the energy of so many people to focus on something that matters so much. So that's what I have to offer you today. I'm really glad you guys had me come. And I think we have just a couple more minutes, maybe, if anybody has any additions.
I don't have any additions. I just want to say thank you. And the what and the we, I think that is going to resonate with me quite a bit, because we are adopting teams, which is completely about the we, yet people are still not confident about what we're using it for. They know that's kind of like email, but you know, that we can see other things and other people. So I think people are using those kinds of things to figure out what the what and the we is and how it's related. It's not just what you think, it's what your teammates think. And I like that phrase. That is going to resonate with me.
Good. Or combination of the information and the collaboration. Very good.
Exactly.
Denise, did you want to say something?
This was very helpful, thinking about the community of the community of practice and how to continue to engage across generations. So this was very helpful, very useful for me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
And a lot of the pieces resonated when I think of the younger people who've come into the workforce, who function very differently from the hierarchical, older structure baby boomers. And there are so many things that connected when you talked about the recognition and the sense of the community, but the recognition and wanting to stand out and wanting to, you know, be up there with the bosses. We're very hierarchical and structured. And, you know, it's interesting trying to navigate across those lines. Thank you.
Glad. Good. Anybody else? Jamie, any last words from you?
I just wanted to say thank you, just like Tara, because I do think looking at things, I will admit, I get really frustrated about, framing things in generational terms, because why I think is because there are so many crossover spots and there are so many interesting differences and nuances about people across generations. Because I would say, for example, my 18-year-old is all these things, and yet also I would say a traditionalist more so than me, right? I think he would rather things be as simple as possible and not complex. I was thinking a lot about the impact of the play date on people's, behavior, because think about it, I really push back against them because I'm the kind of mom who I just want to show up to a park with my children. But the reality is there's so many, we have to schedule a play date where people will be there. And so I think about that picture of the woman looking out the window, it's like, I needed to schedule my time with you, and it had to have a purpose. And, why not just show up and see what happens? That, I love the conversation we had about serendipitous moments and how much are we missing that now, and where are serendipitous moments happening right now, because we're all sort of working from home. And, do we create spaces for serendipity, whether it be in forums like this or just showing up to something randomly online or in our walks around the neighborhood? Where do those engagements happen? And where will they happen, especially when we start talking about workforce, because having the talking head in a Zoom room full of 200 people isn't exactly the ideal situation, right? We all thrive in small groups, and we all want to communicate and connect. And it's much easier to connect to people in a setting like this and smaller. So how are we going to get better at facilitating communication and connection through the venues we do have through this time? I think that's going to be a remarkable thing to watch. And I honestly think that the generation of, kids that are my son's generation and younger will probably be leading that for us, and probably be modeling that for us in many ways. So I am looking and paying a lot of attention to how that's happening in their communities.
Wow, that's great. Well, I wish I could be serendipitous and spontaneous right now, but I actually have to jump to another meeting. But you guys, please feel free to link with me on LinkedIn. Once we link on LinkedIn, you've got my email. Once we have your email, let's just jump on a call or whatever. I'd love to be spontaneous with any of you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Kate.
Take
Thank you,
care. Thank
everybody.
you.
See you next month. Take care. Be safe. Thank you for watching KMCDC's presentation. Hope to see you at the next monthly meeting.